In winter, I pruned these spruces, I wired them out and I created young bonsai out of it. Now, in early spring, they've started to grow and it's time to prune. How to prune picea, spruce, bonsai in early spring. That's what this video is about. Now let's take a look at these trees. What I've done, in a previous video I styled this tree and you can tell the branches were all put in a similar angle to the main trunk. Lower branches were left longer, upper branches were left shorter, although it's hard to see with the extension that we're having here. And more branches are in the upper part than in the lower part. This reflects the natural growing habit of a tree. This is a much smaller picea, and what you can tell is that here I've tried to put a little bit of slight movement in the main trunk. The top has exploded with growth. There's points where there's 3-4 branches growing out of one of the cut sides. The low branch has not grown all that much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pruning this out. How do I prune this out? This branch is a nice example of all the things that need to be done. If you look here, there's a branch here and there's a side branch here. And what you can't tell, but in the back here, there's a third side branch. So out of these 3, at least 1, but probably 2 will have to go. I'll need to check how the attachments are organized. Then we have a branch here growing down, even though there's a back branch here, which also is unwanted. Another branch is coming down here. So let's start with just gently pinching off this soft growth. Now it's already too lignified. Clipping it off. And also this one I'm going to clip off. Now we have this branch. These 2 form the tip of the branches, but I don't want them to extend. So here I'm just going to gently squeeze off the growing tip. The same here. In fact, what you can see already, there's a nice little growing tip starting to form here. Basically side branches. So if I just prune it back to just that bud, I'm not even stopping the branch from extending too much, but it will slow it down. Now here I have a side branch here going to, well, for me to the left, for you to the back, and there's one coming to the front. So effectively this clump here I don't really need. However, this one is also to the side, to the front for you. This is also to the front, this is to the front. So these 2, ideally one of these 2 goes, but then I have the same problem here, 2 branches next to each other. So I'm just going to leave this in place and wait for the rest of the season, but I'm going to shorten it to the small side branch that's already in place. Just like that. Now here there's mainly a lot of needles. I don't really need them, but this is really something maybe in winter that I can clean it out further. So far the wire is still okay, so I'm going to leave that in place. Now this I'm going to do at multiple places. If you now wonder how long should this branch stay, it's quite easy. Effectively, this first branch is the branch that sets the rhythm. I can blend it down a little bit more, hopefully. Just like that. But this length is what determines how long the upper branches can be. This is the longest branch in the tree, the first lower branch. Now here as well, you see there's upward growth, lots of buds here, left, right. I'm going to remove this one which is going down, because I don't want downward growing branches. I'm going to remove the end of the branch here, the growing tip, so that it doesn't further extend. I don't want this to get all that long. I want to in fact encourage growth in this area. So all these ends of all the little sprouts, I'm going to remove the growing tip. And you see that I'm pulling them out, and that is a lot easier to do than with scissors, because with scissors you'll always cut through needles. Now here it's no option because I'm going to remove the woody part, because there's 2 nice extending branches. These I'll now leave alone because, in fact, I removed quite a bit of growth already. This one has not been wired out. I should wire this, but I'll do that in winter. Basically just because I can't be bothered. And again here at the end I'm removing the active growing tip in the hope that it will stimulate the buds in the inner core of the branch to grow. Here the same thing, remove the end tip, remove the end tip. I am pulling them off. Of course, if you see a little bud like that one here, you can decide to cut back. I am confident that if I just pull them off, new buds will form on the inside to start growing again. So I'm at this stage not concerned that I'm removing too many buds. So this is basically how you go through the whole tree. This I need to wire out. This down below I want to remove completely. Because these are not wired, it looks very, very messy, this tree. Maybe I should bring out a little bit of wire. Here as well, there's so much growth and so much extending growth that I'm going to remove everything to be back to 2 branches at one point. Remove the growing tips from the extending branches. Look for branches that go down that are not of any help. Check the branch angle, whether I want to keep it this way. Let's see, can I take this loop? Yes, there's a loop of wire that I can still bring over here. Adjusting it just so slightly. This will need to be wired out once it has extended a little bit more. The same here. Here I actually don't want this one growing down. Let's remove that as well. And on the other side, of course, exactly the same story, right? So here there's a lot of extending growth, but I like some extending growth to match with the length. I'm going to remove the downward growing tips. Just the end tips. As the tree has been wired, it needs to grow a little bit to really set the branches in place, but not too much. This one's up. This one can go. These are nice and alternating. Now the inner branches I'm not going to do much, except for here there's some downward pointing branches. I can now remove those. I left a little bit more foliage when I was styling it, because I wanted to make sure branches didn't die off. Now here a strong one going up and one horizontal. I'm going to prune this one very short, just to keep some living here, and I'm just going to take the tip out of this one. In the crotch, remove. In the back, remove. Might as well clean this up a little bit. Here there's a bud forming. I don't need this. But this is a way to clean up the tree in the first season. Now what you can tell is that the top is of course way too full. This really is a clear example of how top of a tree grows much stronger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all these branches that are hanging down, all the unwanted growing upward. I don't want a lot of foliage in the top. This is key to making a realistic bonsai. Your top of the tree should not be overweight compared to the lower branches. That's also one of the challenges. So branches that sit directly here in the attachment I also remove. I don't want it to be completely cluttered up to the trunk. I want a little bit of space here. As this grows so strongly, you really have to be quite assertive in removing growth here from the top, pinching out the growing tips so they don't extend any further, and really push that energy, that wish to grow down in the trunk to other branches. Now here one branch is now more or less cleaned up, and if I now do the one on top, you can also see how that cleans up the space between the branches. Here I need to use scissors because it's just connected too strongly. Just like that. Remove that little side branch there. And now you can tell that all of a sudden there is a bit of air between these pads, right? This is interesting. Looks like I wired 2 branches, or is it just a side branch which still sits there? Just a side branch. Now this can all go, right? Just like that. Look at how much light that creates. There's many side branches here. I just want 1 or 2. Remember, top of the tree. Be quite assertive in pruning back. It should be light, airy, and the branches should remain thin. So I don't want a lot of foliage up here. Another one that I want to remove completely. Keep it airy, keep it open. Just like that. Right, that covers the pruning of this first tree. Now the second tree, one thing to remember is this was not just styled over winter, but was also repotted over winter. And that is why there is so, well, compact growth on it. There is some extension here, but not the massive backbedding that we've seen here. And the lower branches have hardly extended at all. So this will affect the way that we prune this one, compared to the tree that we did not repot. So this small one was repotted. So the small one was not repotted over winter. The bigger one was, however, repotted, and that affects the growth rate. You can see here on top there's a lot less growth than we had on this one, and therefore this needs to be pruned in a different way than that we pruned that one. Let's take a look. So if you look at this branch here, if you look for alternating patterns, we have a branch here to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. This is a double one, both coming from the attachment. So I'm going to keep the lower one that's more horizontal. Then the next one should be to the right, then one to the left. That means that here I'm going to remove this one. So this one points more or less to the left. Then here I should have one to the right. That's this one. Then I'm removing this one. Right, then this one should be to the left and that one should be to the right. I can still say I'm going to remove the middle one as it is the end, but I'm not going to because this is quite long. Like that. Then you see all these little buds in there. As said, I'm not concerned. I know it will create new buds, but I am going to try and conserve them a little bit. All the growing tips, this can be a bit shorter because it's just a side branch. This will, over time, create backbedding, strong healthy growth on the inside, and stop the branches from extending. There's one last one here. Let's take this out as well. This is a bifurcation. One is gone. Now what we have is a pad with nicely arranged branches. So it's important to remember when you're working on a tree like this that has been styled and repotted in the same year, that it needs to really recover. It needs to create wood to establish the new branches and new trunk line. But next to that it also needs to grow new roots. So it needs to really settle into the pot. And when do you get root growth? Exactly, with tip growth. So what I'm not going to do is remove all the growing tips from the whole tree. For the first year I am quite consciously pruning back, where possible, to buds. That way helping the tree really to deal with this sort of damage, because it is still recovering from the repot and the wiring combined in one season. And normally when you've wired a tree, you don't wire it out as extremely as you do during the first styling, right? Keep that in mind. During the styling we removed maybe 80% of the foliage. Then we pruned off, I don't know, maybe 40-50% of the roots. That really is stress for a tree. Only in the top 2/3 am I going to start pruning some of the growing tips. Here's a very strong one with 2 side buds. I'm going to really prune back to the side buds. This way these buds will straight away take over, and the inner buds that are still quite weak, they will take over. Here there's one hanging down. I can remove that one, but not much more than that. Here there's one coming down. I don't want downward growth. Take that away. And a tree that has been repotted and worked on over the same winter, you'll just have to accept that it will look scruffy for a little bit in order to keep it healthy. A dead bonsai is not a bonsai. Basically, the lower third of the tree I'm only going to thin out if there is anything that really disturbs me. Here all this growth, this is really strong. Look at the extensions that we're getting. So here I can look for, there's a nice small inner bud, and I'm just going to go back to that bud. Here I'm just going to pull the growing tip. Here also just pull the growing tip. Basically what I'm doing when I'm pulling the growing tip, I'm taking the tip that is growing, I'm holding the branchlet gently, don't squeeze it, just exerting enough pressure so that the branch doesn't break off at the base. Here you can also take a few of these inner needles, but here the inner needles will help the tree recover. Here's another one that wants to extend, and I'm going to just remove that. So in the top, remove all the extending kettles. So in contrast to not pinching down below, here in the top the tree normally focuses all the energy. So here I am going to remove all the growing tips in the hope that this stimulates the growth lower down. So in here, if you look, let's see if I can open it up. Here you see a tiny little new sprout, and that is what I'm leaving in place when I'm pruning. Just like that. Now this upper branch is a little bit awkward. The angle is not completely right, and that's probably because the wire that I used is too thin, but it's still okay. Now I need to remove lower growth, anything growing down. I am going to remove this branch because there's a nice little side branch here. This is the continuation. This one is going to be gone, just like that. And now I need to check. This I could wire out, but I don't want it to get too long, so I'm just going to remove the growing tip. Again, sparing the bud here that have formed already. Same here. Just prune it back. There is still a bud. Prune it back. That means that the extensions here are going to stay in place. Now here is a little side branch in the inside. There's one here on the inside and a longer extending one. The one on the inside I'm going to leave alone, but the extending one, the bud is gone. Now this has been cleaned out. I can still remove a bit of the old needles, but it really is a job that you can also do in the middle of winter, right? Don't need to do it now. Just like that. And now the tree is ready again. And I can let it grow for the season and wire the side branches in winter. Right, and these are done for the season. I'll just now let them grow, and later in the year I'm going to remove all the old needles. As said, I'll check the wiring because at some branches already I see a bit of a squeeze, and replace the wiring in winter. I think this is turning out nice. Thought about selling this, but maybe I'll keep it myself. This is going to be a nice bonsai. Who would have thought? Well, thank you. This was Jelle, growing bonsai. See you next time.